Hello everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about Ekbletomys. Ekbletomys hypermnemus is an extinct species of rodent from the islands of Antigua and Barbuda, Lesser Antilles. It was described as the only species of the subgenus Ekbletomys of genus Ekbletomys in the 1962 PhD thesis. But because that name was not available under the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, the species remains formally unnamed to this day, though considered extinct. Examinations of rats indicate that it survived until before 1500 BCE on Antigua. Taxonomy. Ekbletomys is known for abundant skeletal elements, which document it as the largest known orozomine, on par with Megalomys desmaresti, another Italian endemic. Its morphological features indicate that it is distinct from Megalomys, which includes various other Anatolian orozomines and derives from a separate colonization of the Lesser Antilles by orozomines. In the original description, it was placed close to a species now placed in Niflomys, but its relationships have not been studied since. Remains of Ekbletomys were first found on Barbuda in December of 1958, and subsequently on Antigua in 1961. In his 1962 PhD thesis at Harvard University, paleontologist Clayton Ray described them as a new species, Ekbletomys hypermnemus, which he considered distinctive enough to merit its subgenus. Ekbletomys, the specific name, hypermnemus, is derived from hypermnos, which means leeward in ancient Greek, and refers to the species distribution in the Leeward Islands. And the subgeneric name, Ekbletomys, combines ancient Greek, ekbletos, cast up, and mus, mouse, referring to the way Ekbletomys probably reached its islands. Because Ray's thesis did not meet the definition of a published work in the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, both new names proposed by Ray are not available and cannot be used in formal zoological nomenclature. The name has rarely been used in the literature on Anatolian orozomines since, and no formal description has been published. Thus, the animal still lacks a formally available name. Large orozomines from Antigua and Barbuda have been reported in several subsequent studies, but these did not explicitly refer the material to Ray's orozomines hypermnemus. New material has come from Indian Creek and Vormazakari on Antigua, and from Indian Town Trail and Suffers on Barbuda. These studies referred the Antigua and Barbuda material to undescribed species B, which is also known from archaeological material on Guadeloupe, Montserrat, and Marie-Galante. In addition to this large species, other smaller orozomines may also have occurred on Antigua. Two species of orozomine were also formerly present on Barbuda. Description. Ekbletomys is known for numerous bones from Barbuda, including over 100 femora and tabulify, bones of the hind limb, 4 substantial cranium skull fragments, one of which was designated by Ray as the holotype, and various others. At the time of Ray's writing, the material from Antigua had not yet been completely sorted out, and consequently the description is based mainly on specimens from Barbuda. The Barbuda material, and particularly the skulls, shows a number of features distinctive enough for orozomine to persuade Ray to allocate it to its own subgenus and species. The front part of the skull is short and broad. The interorbital region of the skull, located between the eyes, is narrower than that of any other Orosaurian. The sumusal back roots of the zygomatic arches, cheekbones, are oriented perpendicular to the main axis of the skull. The incisive foramina, openings of the palate between the incisors and the molars, are extremely short. The molars are large. The palate is short, extending barely beyond the third molar. The anterior cone, front cusp of the first upper molar, is divided by a marked anteromedian flexus. The length of the holotype skull is larger than that of all specimens but one of Ekbletomys dismaresti, indicating that Ekbletomys is among the largest Orosaurian species known. As Ekbletomys, and Megalomies underlay are from the same island, a close relation between the two would be expected, but the two differ so much that we declared any special relationship between the genus Megalomies and Ekbletomys to be out of the question. In all measurements that could be examined, M. andreae, which is known only for upper incisor and the lower jaw, with the first molar missing, falls far outside the range of variation of Ekbletomys. And in addition, it differs in the shape of the folds of the molars, which are broader than in Ekbletomys, and in the more elongate of the lower third molar. More complete material is available for the two Megalomies species known to have survived into historic times. M. dismarsti and M. lucei. M. dismarsti is about as large as Ekbletomys, and M. lucei is slightly smaller, in sharp contrast to the relatively narrow interorbital, and Ekbletomys. These two taxons show a very broad interorbital. Also, Ekbletomys shows a relatively large zygomatic breadth of the skull, whereas the relative value is at the lower end of the variation among Orosaurians and Megalomies. The homular process of the subfemoral bone is much longer and more slender in Ekbletomys. Megalomies also have relatively short incisive foramina, but not nearly as short as these in Ekbletomys. Although overall skull length is about equal to both species, molars in Megalomies are smaller than those of Ekbletomys, and the incisors are larger, reflecting relatively larger molars and slender incisors in Ekbletomys, and the reverse of Megalomies. We consider Ekbletomys to be most closely related to Orosaurians, Ekbletomys, a species which at the time encompassed virtually all forms now placed in the genus Ekbletomys. The two agree in their robust skull with short incisive foramina, a broad brain case, a similarly formed interorbital, suborbital crest situated close together near the middle of the skull, and presence of an intermediate flexus on the upper first molar. We suggested that the origin of Ekbletomys lies in a continental ancestor similar to Ekbletomys. Distribution and habitat. Orosaurians, Ekbletomys, Ekbletomys is known for material from two small limestone caves, a 2-foot bay at the eastern side of the island of Barbuda, Antigua and Barbuda, and from a site named Mill Reef in the far east of Antigua, also in Antigua and Barbuda, which has not been described in detail. In both Barbudan caves, the Ekbletomys material was found in red to yellow unconsolidated sediments on the cave floor, which were partially overlain by a darker sediment that yielded the introduced wattas, indicating deposition after the first European contact around 1500. These sediments are probably ancient oil pellets deposited by a burrowing owl. Athena Cunicularia, and they also yielded the fry. Aleph Pterodactylus, John Stoner, the lizards, the Catactylus, Wapicata, Philodocilus, Griswold, and Analyst, Lecce, the birds, Pepnes, Hermenery, Zanella, Areta, Flabavina, Passerina, Tyrannus, Bacola, and an unidentified fringillid, and the bats, Momoops, Valle, Bunchipella, Cavernum, Nellus, Dreminus, Celerita, Bracelicis, and Molossus, the Posozits, the deposits that included Ekbletomys, or probably very late Quaternary, but pre-Columbian, and the entering material ranges in age from about 2500 BCE to post-Columbian, in order to colonize Barbuda and Antigua. Ekbletomys must have reached the islands through overwater disposal, probably by means of rafting, where he thought it improbable that the ancestor of the animal reached the islands through repeated overwater disposal, island hopping from mainland South America along the Lesser Antilles all the way to Barbuda, even when sea levels dropped during the Pleistocene. The animal would still have been required to overcome 7 water barriers, a series of voyages no less wondrous than those of Sinbad. Instead, he argued that the animal reached the islands directly on a raft from mainland South America, probably from one of the continent's large rivers. Bye for now.